So Grunty has to eat you in order to for the adventure to start. Basically, you have to enter through her mouth, right? You have to enter through her mouth into the inside of her effigy, and that's where the adventure takes place. So the adventure takes place inside of Grunty. You have been devoured by her, and now you are seeing what is inside of her. Right? Almost as if the jiggies that you're collecting, the picture that you're putting together, is about Grunty's own inner world. Now, I said that it seemed as if Grunty is always unsatisfied with her body. And another kind of strange resonance with this is that the game takes place inside a stone statue of herself. So she lives inside a castle that is shaped like herself, right? So in Grunty's Revenge, she's trapped inside a robot. But in Banjo-Kazooie, she's also trapped inside a stone shell, which is the fortress itself. Another thing about this, of course, is that the game begins with you entering into Grunty's head through her mouth, and her head then is the game. You are inside of her head, visiting her memories, her emotions, which I find interesting because Banjo-Tooie ends, the saga ends. The saga begins with you entering her head, and then it ends with all the characters playing a game with her head. And she has been decapitated. So her head is the central aspect of the game that the characters are playing. And so the saga ends with her decapitation, which seems like a strange sort of poetic justice, since she had symbolically decapitated Mumbo Jumbo, right? I think that the details are not clear, but Mumbo Jumbo used to be her own personal shaman. Then she gets angry at him for some reason and turns his head into a skull, thus symbolically decapitating him. I think in Banjo-Kazooie, Mumbo Jumbo helps Banjo and Kazooie just so that he can gain vengeance on Gruntilda. So even though it's not explicitly stated, it's almost as if Gruntilda being decapitated at the end is the poetic justice for having decapitated Mumbo Jumbo. And so if we take her head as being the object, the ball that's being used in the game at the end of Banjo-Tooie, and the fact that the whole of Banjo-Kazooie takes place inside of her mind, inside of her head, then it's interesting to note that in Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, 20 years in the past, right next to Grunty's stone head is the stone head of King Jingling, the Jinjo King, resting on the ground, as if Grunty had decapitated the statue of King Jingling in order to build her own statue, fortress. So that's interesting, because Grunty seems to have decapitated two people symbolically, once Mumbo Jumbo and another time King Jingling. However, Mumbo Jumbo is essentially a Jinjo, despite the fact that the developers at Rare deny this. What they don't deny is that the assets used for Mumbo's body are clearly the assets of a Jinjo body. So no matter what the backstory is, let's say that the actual polygon reality is that Mumbo's body is that of a Jinjo, and furthermore, a Jinjo crowned with feathers and a certain sort of, the skull is like heightens the head in some way, and of course he is more than a Jinjo. He's more powerful than your regular Jinjo because he is a shaman. So the positions of the Jinjo King and Mumbo are sort of similar in them being powerful Jinjos, and furthermore, both of them have been symbolically decapitated by Grunty. Yeah, so the thing that kind of ties it all to the head being used as a ball in the game is that the Jinjo King is the one who, we are told, hosts these sort of football ball game, I can't remember what it's called, this sort of Mayan game tournaments, which Bottles is supposed to attend. So Bottles, as the character who dies and is then reborn as this sort of like Christ figure, Bottles lives right next to the king. Their huts are right next to each other, and there's this interesting contrast where the king lives in this luxurious golden palace, Bottles lives in this really humble small cottage, and yet they are on equal terms. In fact, you could almost say that Bottles has the king's favour. He seems to be a favourite friend of the king and takes part in these annual Jinjo games, which involve a ball, which are a ball game. And furthermore, Bottles' house is the passageway towards the Jiggy temple. So the humble nature of Bottles is not entirely what it seems, which also gives him this sort of Christ figure thing, that he's a humble earthly being, but he seems to be very tightly, deeply connected to the divine and to the king, right? So one aspect of the Banjo-Tooie plot is there is a championship, there is a game, probably a video game, that is going to take place, but it can't because Bottles dies. So Bottles' death is an obstacle to the game, and his rebirth as king, because he is reborn on the day of his birthday party, so he is literally birthed again with a crown on his head because he's celebrating his birthday. So he is reborn as the king, and then his birthday party becomes a game of throwing the ball around with Grunty's head. The head whose memories and dreams we were possibly exploring in Banjo-Kazooie in the first place.